Fujifilm have an illustrious history when it comes to making medium format fixed lens rangefinder cameras. There was tons in the analog days, but nowadays you don't find a lot of digital manufacturers making medium format cameras with fixed lenses. Until now. So what happens if Fujifilm takes an X100 body and a GFX sensor and just mashes them together? Like, other than broken camera parts all over the place and a lot of wasted money, you might actually end up with this, the Fujifilm GFX100RF. Now, the RF is not a rangefinder as much as the RF moniker alludes to that, but it is a very interesting camera and we're going to take a look at it. So Jordan is actually shooting right now on a Fujifilm GFX100RF. Of course, I'm going to be taking photos on this one right here. These are pre-production cameras, so keep that in mind, but there's a lot that we can talk about and a lot that we can review on these, so you'll definitely want to watch. And I know we're in gloomy Calgary. I mean, I got a few photos of it. There's like 3 here. Take a look. But I promise you that we have a very cool location that you're definitely gonna want to stick around for, so don't go away. And of course, this is a really interesting camera because the Leica Q3 is a very popular camera on the market, universally loved, prestigious, expensive, absolutely, but it does give you that high resolution capability with a fixed lens that's easy to walk around with. Now we have this, and this might provide the Leica Q3 with some stiff competition. I'm Chris Niccolls, this is PetaPixel, and thank God this camera finally has a 28mm full frame equivalent lens. Let's address the Mount Fujifilm in the room, okay? This is a 35mm f4, and that is not very bright. I mean, that is gonna give us a full frame 28mm field of view equivalent and roughly what you get out of an f3.2 aperture as far as depth of field goes. So if you think about the Leica Q3, even though that's a full frame sensor, that's gonna give a shallower depth of field. Even the Fujifilm X100 with its APS-C sensor and its 23mm f2 lens is still gonna give us ever so slightly shallower depth of field. Okay, so this lens is not about getting shallow depth of field. I guess that's not the goal, but it is mated to one of our favorite sensors. We have the 102 megapixel sensor in here that Fujifilm's been using in their latest cameras like the GFX100 S2, and it is beautiful. Tons of dynamic range, tons of resolution, and it's very interesting to have all that in a camera this size. And why would Fujifilm do something like this? Well, that's because they wanted to make this camera as compact and honestly as X100-like as possible. And in the hand, in practical terms, it actually feels quite similar, a little bit taller, but otherwise it handles very similarly. This is a fully machined metal top plate and bottom plate, and yet the camera only weighs 735 grams. That's with the battery and an SD card in there. And it is weather sealed, much like an X100 is, which is to say, if you've got the filter adapter on and a filter on there, then you're pretty safe. I mean, look, if I take the filter adapter and the hood off, that 35mm f4 barely extends off the body. Actually, it reminds me a lot of the X100's lens. And if you take a look at a Leica Q3 with its faster lens, it does extend quite a ways off the body, much larger than this. Now, would I personally prefer that this had an f2.8 aperture and extended off the body further, was a little bit larger on the camera? Probably I would, but I see what Fujifilm is trying to do here. They're trying to make a medium format sensor in as small a camera body as possible, and there's absolutely some merit to that. Now, no doubt the GFX100RF is going to be a pricey camera, but what I do love is we're getting some top-notch displays here. So first off, 5.76 million EVF. You can boost it up to 100 frames per second refresh rate if you want. It's got decent eye relief, and I really appreciate having that higher resolution EVF, especially when I want to look at my shots, zoom in after I take them, and really make sure that things are sharp on that 100 megapixel sensor. And then the back panel, it's got this very slim fit. I love that Fujifilm make these panels that don't take up a lot of space. As you can see, it does tilt there on the 2 axes, 2.1 million dots of resolution, and it's pretty decent in bright conditions. Now, the GFX100RF uses the exact same battery that we find in the other current GFX bodies right now. That's the WP235, and this does give us good capacity. We're getting about 830 SEPA rated shots. That's a lot more than I expected, but that's gonna bring us to one of the other things that might really upset people about this camera. Not only does it have an f4 lens, but there's also no IBIS, and that's probably why the battery life is so good. IBIS would be fantastic in a camera like this just to stabilize things handheld, especially considering that when you've got that 100 megapixel sensor in there, you gotta be stable to maximize the resolution out of it. What Fujifilm is counting on is this. First off, we have a leaf shutter inside this lens, and that doesn't have any sort of, smack or movement to the camera, so that does help. And as well, because this sensor is pretty good at higher ISOs, they kind of want you to crank the ISOs higher. No matter what, the lack of IBIS in this body is going to be a contentious issue, and I certainly wish it was in there, although undoubtedly it would make the body bigger, and that's going against Fujifilm's design strategy. So the way that I see it, if I'm shooting on the street, doing street photography, I'm going to want to use a faster shutter speed anyways to freeze action, so that's okay. But if I'm going to be shooting landscape or architecture, I'm going to have a tripod on the bottom of this camera a lot. And hey, while we're on the topic of using a tripod, so this camera has an interesting feature. There is a built-in optical 4-stop ND filter. Now, that's kind of interesting. I'm not really going to use it for situations like shooting really bright conditions because the lens isn't that bright to have a problem with the 4,000th of a second shutter speed. However, this could be cool on a tripod if I want to do long exposure effects and not have to bring filters with me, or combine it with filters. This lens takes 49mm filters, by the way, nice and small and easy. It's also going to be really nice for video because Jordan right now is shooting me on the GFX100RF with no ND filters on the front of the lens. He's just relying on the 4 stops inside. Now here's something I did not expect on the GFX100RF, and that's that we get dual SD card slots. And I only say that because, this seems to me more of like a casual travel camera or urban shooter camera. You don't often see dual card slots, but that is a really nice touch. They're both UHS 2 speed, so I can transfer those large files quickly to fast SD cards. And it's just nice to have that redundancy. I could put 2 cards in here for extra storage or back up to both cards. I did not expect that, but I'm happy to see it. Okay, so now we got a lot to talk about here when we talk about the controls and handling on this GFX100RF. It takes a lot of design cues from the X100, including the control scheme. So let's just talk about what's similar first. So looking at our top plate here, we've got an on-off switch right around the shutter, custom button right beside that, exposure compensation, a really easy place to turn with your thumb, and I'm not finding that accidentally bumping. As well, we got the classic shutter speed dial. I like this analog style dial. Pull up to change my ISO. I mean, very cool and very functional. Now, one thing I want to mention about the overall experience and handling on this camera is just how beautifully everything is designed and machined. I mean, the knurling on here is cut very precisely. Everything feels nice to turn. The front of the lens, the manual focus ring, has got great resistance to it. And they've put these 2 little knobs on the aperture ring that you can easily find and turn the aperture ring with. On the back of the camera, again, very familiar territory. Quick button there right up next to the thumb control dial. And I like that that's got a customizable press-in function, autofocus lock button, which I always use for autofocus on, is in a nice position. We also get our classic single continuous or manual focus selector switch, autofocusing joystick on here, nice touchscreen interface as well. And what they have done, we got the same 4 buttons here below the autofocusing joystick, but they've now moved a little bit and they've put drive and delete at the very bottom. And I actually like that because I find that for me, it's natural when I want to delete photos to look to that bottom button. But on the front of the camera, although the controls look very similar to an X100, they actually perform slightly different functions. So first off, we've got the lever here in the front. Looks like an X100's, but it doesn't do anything as far as, changing from a hybrid viewfinder to analog or to fully EVF, because we don't have that situation here. Instead, this gives you a really nice customizable control scheme. I've got a button in the middle here. I like that for Fujifilm simulation modes. And then I can also click this switch in one direction for one customizable function, pull it in another for another customizable function, and then I can also long press in both directions for 2 more customizable functions. So I can really set this up the way I like. And I have to say, the 100RF is actually very customizable. I love how I can change a lot of the buttons and settings here to really set up the camera to behave the way that I like. Now, while we're on the front of the camera, we've got a front command dial here right below the on-off switch and right above this new rocker dial. So this function below, this rocker dial, this is something actually you can't customize on the camera. It's locked in to just give you digital zoom only in photography mode. So this lets you just have different crop formats. So if you don't want to shoot that wide angle, you can make use of that extra resolution and go down a little bit tighter. And finally, we've got one more control, which is actually unique to the 100RF. It's on the back of the camera here. It's a command dial that's set vertically on the back of the camera, and this sets our various aspect ratios. I mean, it's nice because we've got a big sensor, lots of resolution. Why not give ourselves the option to have different ratios? My only complaint is, first off, I feel like the photographic ratios that I would commonly use, like 4:3, 3:2, and 1:1, they're not right next to each other. And I kind of wish they were so that I could just click very quickly between them. But I also feel like we've got way too many here. I mean, we've got 16:9, 65:24, 17:6. We've also got 3:4 vertical, for example. Why do we have a 4:3 horizontal and a 3:4 vertical? I can just turn the camera sideways and get full resolution anyways. Now, there is also an option here to set this to C, and then you can customize a command dial to do your aspect ratios instead. And you might like that better because then you can see it on the screen, you can see it all happening. So I'm not sure if I totally am in love with this button. I gotta have more time to play with it and I'll let you know. But one thing I do want to point out that is very cool, when you're doing things like the digital crop or the different aspect ratios, you can customize the view mode so that on the back of the screen or in the EVF, you either just get black borders to show you the hard cut for your aspect ratio, or you get frame lines to show you what's outside of those aspect ratios, or you can just have the outside darker gray than the actual aspect ratio. And I do really appreciate that I got those three options on how I want to view those. Okay, so my lovely model, of course, you know what this means. We're gonna shoot some flash, and here's why. So Fujifilm, we've been asking them to make leaf shutter lenses for the GFX system, and they still haven't. So this is the first GFX Fujifilm camera that actually has a leaf shutter, and that means that you can get sync speeds at any shutter speed, even up to the maximum of 1/4000th. And I am using the Westcott FJ400 because we love their flashes, and this has the power I need because the 4,000th of a second, I mean, that's gonna bring all that ambient light down, but I wanna shoot f4 at 80 ISO, the base ISO here, to get the best image quality. And so I'm getting that power through this softbox, Manny Ortiz Beauty Dish, onto Jordan. And Jordan, for this shot, I want, yes, face your body towards the flash, good, but I want you looking off this way. And what I want you to do is channel like disgruntled farmer.
Okay.
But if he was Clint Eastwood, okay? So like, yeah, I want serious, steely eyes, Clint Eastwood, but like, you know, the everyman. Yes. Oh, beautiful. Love it. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we get that nice dramatic background. Jordan's lit up really nicely here. And this is one of the advantages of having that flash sync speed capability with the leaf shutter. So if you want to get a similar setup and do a very similar thing, the Westcott FJ400, I love that it's wireless. I'm going right off the wireless transmitter here, right through the Manny Ortiz softbox, so Jordan looks beautiful. Clint Eastwood, but soft. And if you guys want to pick up this kit, go to fjwestcott.com or click the link in the description below. Okay, so that pretty much does it for the overall handling of the camera, but I want to talk about my shooting experience, and I think it's time to reveal where I'm going to be going. So I'm going to go to a city that I've actually always wanted to go to. Fujifilm is flying Jaren and myself out to Fujikina in Prague. In the Czech. Yes, I'm sorry. I've always wanted to go there. Jordan doesn't get to go. I'm sorry, Jordan. I know I'm a terrible person, but anyways, again, as usual, we appreciate Fujifilm taking us out there to have this experience and have a beautiful city to shoot this camera in, but it will not change our opinions about this camera at all. So I promised you a different location, and here we are now. We are in Prague in the beautiful Czech Republic. We're at the famous Charles Bridge to start our tour here of this beautiful city. I can't wait. And so this is going to be a really good opportunity to test the GFX100RF in a sort of urban environment, lots of architecture. And the first thing I want to talk about from my experiences is the autofocus performance. So Jared and I were actually up very early this morning. The jet lag, of course, is real. So we actually came to Charles Bridge here to see if we could catch a sunrise. Pretty cloudy day. I mean, the sun's now broken out, but it was still really beautiful, and it gave me a good opportunity to test the camera in quite low light situations. And the experience is going to be very similar to what we've seen on other GFXs. And this is both good and bad. So the good, we've got the latest subject detection modes here. Eye detect works very well. I mean, I'm finding the subject detections accurate. I still don't like the fact that human detect is separate from all the other subject detections, but that's fine. Who knows when Fujifilm will change that. Now, as far as focusing goes, I'm still finding tracking autofocus in particular challenging. And this is something you've seen on a lot of Fujifilms. And this is where I want to put a box on a subject and then have the camera track it as it moves around in the frame. And I find that for slower situations, like just, focusing on a subject, recomposing and shooting, it does a good job. But if I move the camera quickly, or if my subject's moving in a street photography situation, the tracking autofocus often just goes to the background and I've got to figure something out and redo it. And that's been frustrating. As well, I'm finding that only in tracking autofocus, the continuous autofocus is quite jittery. So the camera's constantly reevaluating. It reminds me of old school contrast detect continuous autofocus, and I don't like it. It's kind of distracting to focus with. So I find myself going back to just zone focusing with continuous autofocus, or good old-fashioned single point autofocus where I lock, recompose, and press all the way, and that's working quite well. So of course, back in Calgary, I talked about the overall handling of the camera and the controls. I like how customizable it is. Everything feels really good. And now that I've had more time with it just to shoot, a few observations. So first off, manual controls, loving it. Really easy, really simple to change. The only complaints that I have about the camera are actually pretty minor, and that's the on-off switch and this zoom rocker. I just find that they're very easy to accidentally bump when you're putting this in or out of a camera bag. So I'm often finding the camera's turned on when I didn't intend for it to be, or that I've just bumped this zoom rocker and I lift the camera up and I'm cropped in a little bit. It's not the end of the world. I mean, it's easy to fix and change, but I am noticing that quite a bit. So image quality on the 100RF, I mean, this is a known commodity. We've seen this sensor before. I love it. I'm getting tons of dynamic range. I've been really pushing this camera in very low light situations. Prague at nighttime is quite dark, so I'm pushing up to 12,800 ISO, and we're still getting decent results. But overall, I'm getting resolution, I'm getting dynamic range, I'm getting sharpness. I will say, actually, the camera's been pretty easy to hand hold, even to slower shutter speeds. I'm pushing down to 30th or 60th of a second and still getting usable sharpness, but I know that without IBIS, I'm not getting the maximum resolution of the sensor. So of course, because we've got a fixed wide angle lens here, we're not just reviewing a camera in this video, but also a lens as well. And as you can see right now, the sun is breaking out, which gives an opportunity to test flare. So really nice results. I mean, Fujifilm always have good lens coatings. This lens is doing a really good job. Shooting wide open, you can see no real loss of contrast. Everything's still nice and vivid looking. And we stop down the lens heavily. We're not getting any of those annoying or distracting ghosts. So this is a really nice result for shooting on bright sunny days like we now have. Now, while we have the sunlight, of course, the other thing I want to test was sun stars. And I also got to try a little bit of this out early in the morning. We had some street lights going on. We want to try it there. And actually, this lens doesn't deliver great sun stars. So you can see stop down here, we're not really getting a lot of definition. Points of light just kind of spread out all over the place. So it's not very dramatic. I actually liked it better in the mid-range of the lens, more around like f6 or f7.1. That's where it actually seems to do an okay job. But again, nothing to write home about. So as you can see, we're here in Prague Castle. Beautiful cathedral behind me. Tons of detail, so I figure why not do a shot so you can see, the inherent resolution of that 100 megapixel sensor. So enjoy that, and I'm gonna go find a bench to sleep on.
Okay, Jordan here, back in snowy Alberta to talk about how the GFX100RF performs for video capture, and it's actually filming me right now. And I really think you can kind of look at this camera in two ways. And if you compare it to the GFX100 II, this is scaled back quite a bit. We're not getting the higher resolution video modes, the faster frame rates. This is only capable of recording 4K up to 30 frames per second, and it is bin, so it's not going to give us the incredible sharpness we're seeing with some of the cameras with oversampled recording. That being said, for a fixed lens camera, this is a very capable video device. We've got a headphone jack, a microphone jack. We have great assist tools like vector scopes and waveforms, as well as the ability to record F-Log and F-Log2 right into the camera. But I don't think this is ever going to be a primary recording device for a few reasons. First of all, we do have that slower f4 lens that is fixed on this, so it's not the most flexible that way. But as well, there's no optical stabilization on this, no IBIS, no lens-based stabilization. It does give you the option to do digital stabilization, and that'll do a pretty good job at fast shutter speeds, but at slower shutter speeds, it's still gonna look pretty rough. But where I can really see this excelling is if you go out to a beautiful landscape with a tripod and you wanna film yourself like I'm doing right now, it'll do a very nice job. But look, as long as you've got a tripod or a gimbal handy, the GFX100RF is capable of capturing some pretty nice looking video. That's more than I was expecting.
And it's day 2, and we're coming to you from southern Bohemia in the beautiful town of Český Krumlov. And I've had a chance to look at some of the samples I've taken here, and I want to talk about the lens before we go any further. So first off, this is a very sharp lens, beautiful detail. We did shoot some test charts, but even from the samples, you can see tons of detail in the center of the image. And you can see here that even when we stop the lens down, I mean, we're already getting tons of contrast wide open. There's not really much improvement. If you look at the corners here, very good detail, even wide open at f4 in the corners. And I will say that this is actually a really flat shooting lens. So if you're focused in the center, the corners will still largely be in focus as well, which makes this camera ideal for not just shooting flat objects, you know, like we might have here, but also landscapes and things like that where the corner sharpness can be well retained. So beautiful lens as far as sharpness goes. But the other thing I wanted to look at was bokeh. So this lens, as you can see here when shooting bokeh, not like a super shallow depth of field lens. This is fairly wide and it is fairly slow, as we've talked about, but when you do get specular highlights in the background, you'll notice a fairly strong soap bubble effect, even a little bit of busyness in the specular highlights, and there is a sort of general harshness to the out of focus areas. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not super smooth either. Sometimes I'll notice sort of a double image effect or a bit of a blurring effect when shooting up close, but otherwise, in most situations, the background's not that far out of focus, and this doesn't bother me as much as I thought it might. And so as I've had more time to shoot on this and talking about the lens in general, I want to talk about something else. So I've often criticized any sort of digital zooming where you're trading megapixels for a tighter field of view. And of course, that's a very common thing to have on these cameras that have a fixed lens. I mean, I complained about this on the Leica Q with its 60 megapixels, but on this particular camera, I'm gonna say it is more useful than I thought, and I've actually been cropping quite a bit just because this sensor has so much native detail to begin with. I mean, you do have the capacity here to crop down quite tightly, still get a really usable photo, be able to still zoom in and get good detail, and so I think that's actually more useful on this platform than any that I've tried so far that work in a similar fashion. So I'm finding myself shooting the 100RF at a fairly sedentary rate, you know, because we're taking it casual, just kind of wandering around town and exploring, but also because I want to maintain that 16-bit dynamic range, and you only get that when you're shooting single shot mode. But if you are going to do some street photos, or you need some quicker action, this camera can shoot up to 6 frames per second with full autofocus, tracking, continuous, all that kind of stuff. Your bit rate drops to 14-bit. You still get tons of detail, but you do have the option to shoot faster frame rates there. And I can go about 40 raw files sustained burst before it has to slow down on the card. So you can certainly get a stretch of 4 or 5 seconds of burst shooting, no problem. So I gotta say, this is a very interesting camera. It's taken me a little bit of time to just kind of get to grips with it, but the more I use it, the more I kind of realize some of the magic going on here, because it's compact enough that it doesn't feel like I'm walking around with a GFX camera in my hands. And this 100RF is really for me capturing the spirit of using an X100, which is ideal for this kind of excursion where you're traveling and you're in small city streets. You want something compact, light, and easy to adjust, and fun, honestly. And I'm actually having quite a bit of fun using this camera. I'm liking having that extra width, the full frame 28mm field of view. I'm enjoying that compared to an X100. That's making me happy. And the two things that I was a little bit skeptical about, the digital cropping, for example, and also not having IBIS, I am actually finding that it's not as big a deterrent as I thought, just because looking at the shots that I did in low light at slow shutter speeds, it is very stable. I'm not losing a lot of detail, and I'm really happy with that. And frankly, this sensor has the resolution that I can crop. So I wanted to revisit this whole concept of using the aspect ratio dial and whether I enjoyed that part of the shooting experience now having had more time. And you know, taking that time, talking to some of the other creators, seeing the reactions, it is a fun tool. I mean, I think a lot of people are really enjoying using it. They're enjoying the more cinematic, ultra-wide panoramic kind of looks and stuff like that. For me, I've played with it. I still stand by my original assertion that there's too many on here and it's a little bit cumbersome to use. So I'm going to be no fun Niccolls, and I'm still going to basically stick to shooting 4:3 ratio and then cropping after the fact. But you absolutely do have the option of playing with this. I think it's really something you're just going to have to get in your hands and try to see if you really enjoy it. So, you know, I found myself really enjoying the GFX100RF experience, and I think the natural comparison to make is to the Leica Q, because they're both designed to do the same thing. Keep in mind that they're both expensive cameras, but the Leica Q3 is even more so. But they're also a beautiful, stylish, and functional companion to have on excursions just like this. I mean, traveling around, exploring new places, having something small and stylish and compact. And I think Fujifilm have done a really good job of making this camera at least look and feel like it's worth the expensive price point. And it occurs to me that both the Leica Q and the Fujifilm X100 are shooting experiences that are almost universally loved by people that use them. And I feel like the 100RF is going to capture that same kind of shooting experience. So I think you're going to enjoy using it. It's just having that 100 megapixel power in the sensor that makes this camera unique. And I think now that I've played with it, that is actually a very interesting direction to go. Hopefully this look at the 100RF, as you know, as pre-production as the camera is, I feel like it's been a pretty full-fleshed, almost review. So hopefully you guys got a lot of information out of this, and it helps you decide if this camera is right for you. I feel like it does a lot of things right that both the X100 and the Leica Q capture, but it gives you that really powerful sensor, and there's something cool there. And if you enjoy the content that we're making, consider supporting us with a PetaPixel.com membership. $3 a month, $30 a year. You get to peruse all of our articles ads free on the website, as well as get nice discounts at store.petapixel.com and lots of other benefits. Download exclusive access to our sample galleries, the JPEGs and the RAW files. I think you guys really enjoy that too. But thanks so much for joining us for today's video. We'll see you soon with more on PetaPixel.